Today we have a little bit of a history lesson. You've gotten some of it from my wonderful wife, Meredith. And I just wanted to set the stage as we delve into the message, because 220 years ago, a lot was happening. When this congregation was formed in 1805, many events were happening in the world. In America, the Louisiana Territory was created. Lewis and Clark, with their Corps of Discovery, were on their way to the Pacific Ocean. In Europe, the Napoleonic Wars were raging on. Emperor Napoleon had plans to invade Great Britain, but the British victory at the Battle of Trafalgar off the coast of Spain curtailed those plans. It was in that battle that the 47-year-old Admiral Horatio Nelson was mortally wounded on the HMS Victory as he uttered his last words, "Now I am satisfied. Thank God I have done my duty." Also, the Marines stormed the shores of Tripoli, freeing the U.S. hostages, which resulted in a peace treaty in the Barbary Coast. In January of 1805, in Coalbrookdale, England, the world's first iron bridge was opened to the public and was a symbol of the Industrial Revolution. In the world of music, Ludwig van Beethoven debuted his Symphony No. 3, Eroica, in Vienna. Later in that same year, his only opera, Fidelio, was debuted. The population in Providence in 1805 was approximately, my sources said 10,000. My wife said 13,000. So I'm going to go with my wife because she's the church historian. Plus, I have to go home today. The majority of the population was English Protestants. African Americans were also a significant population consisting of both enslaved and free people. There were also smaller groups of Europeans, including Irish and French Huguenots. There was still an indigenous population present, consisting of mainly the Narragansett tribe. This morning, we heard about the formation of our congregation on May 1st, 1805. The church founders responded to a need from the growing population of Providence. There was a need on the west side of the city for a Baptist congregation. 16 brave souls left the comfort of their established churches under the pastorship of Reverend Joseph Cornell to fill the gap in the city. From that modest beginning on Chestnut Street, the congregation moved 10 times in the church's history. The church established its first meeting house on Eddy and Pine Street in 1807 in response to a growing congregation and the need for a more permanent home. The congregation dealt with the rising tides that would flood the meeting house building, thus giving it the nickname the Muddy Dock Church. When the great September gale of 1815 destroyed the church building, there was no thought of giving up or packing it in. The congregation met the challenge and moved on. They met temporarily at the Aborn Street Academy and the schoolhouse on Chestnut Street, while funds were immediately procured and began construction on the Pine Street Baptist Church. The gap was filled at the cost of $10,000, and the church was built within a year. As the city of Providence grew and developed around our church, we moved and kept moving in the 19th century, evermore meeting the spiritual needs of the community and filling the gaps each time. Finally, on October 1st, 1915, the groundbreaking of this church building began. It still bore the name of the previous structure on Weybosset Street as Central Baptist Church. This time, the gap was filled on the east side of Providence, which was considered the country. The neighborhood grew once again around the church, which had its first worship service in April of 1917. Each of the 10 moves of this congregation were in response to the challenges of a growing city and the need to fill a gap that resulted from Providence's development. In today's scripture, Nehemiah was overseeing the restoration of the walls of Jerusalem. After much decline and ruin from previous attacks, the defensive walls of Jerusalem provided no protection due to a multitude of gaps. Large gaps in the wall made the structure useless and left the inhabitants open for attack from various peoples in the area. Nehemiah received permission and supplies to rebuild the wall around the city. Families were recruited to repair and rebuild sections of the wall. They also armed various members of each family with bows, swords, and spears to guard and protect the gaps that were being restored. The workers were in danger of attack, so armed members of each family filled the gaps as the walls were being rebuilt. The rebuilding of the wall was a crucial step in securing the peace of the city and to ensure future growth and development. First, they had to fill the gaps of the walls. Where are the gaps in today's world? I don't believe today's gaps are physical like the wall around Jerusalem, nor are the gaps like the ones our congregation faced in 1805 and throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. There are indeed many gaps today. Very much like 1805, wars are still being waged, slavery exists in many forms, and injustice runs rampant. I recently heard an interesting story about the sinking of the HMS Titanic. On that fateful night in the North Atlantic Ocean in the early hours of April 15th, 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg and began the slow process of sinking into the cold depths of the ocean. On board were 2,240 passengers and crew. Once the danger on hand was assessed, the alarm sounded. Flares were set off, and the telegraph broadcasted the Mayday call. Crew members assisted passengers to put on their life vests and proceed to inadequate number of lifeboats. In the vicinity of the sinking Titanic were 3 ships: the SS Samson, the SS Californian, and the RMS Carpathia. The Samson was only 7 miles away when they saw the flares. Unfortunately, the Samson was illegally hunting seals. In fear of being caught, the ship sped away into the opposite direction. The Californian was 14 miles away. The captain saw the flares, but looked around and saw the ice fields surrounding his ship. He felt the danger was too great for his ship, and he returned to bed. The next day, the crew read the telegraph distress call. The 3rd ship, the RMS Carpathia, was 58 miles away when they received the call, and they were heading in the opposite direction. The captain took a moment, prayed to God for direction. He immediately ordered the ship to be turned around and head full steam ahead through the ice fields toward the sinking Titanic. The captain went on the ship's loudspeaker and announced, "This ship is no longer a luxury liner. It's a rescue ship." The Carpathia was able to rescue over 700 people. I use this illustration because we are very much like those 3 ships. In our response to the gaps in our society where God's love is needed, we have 3 choices. Like the Samson, we could feel guilt and shame and inadequacy and remove ourselves from the gap or need. Second, we could respond like the Californian and feel the risk to ourselves is too great and choose not to react at all. Or like the Carpathian, we could seek God's counsel and respond in faith, putting the needs of others above ours. Where do we begin? We can respond to these gaps as individuals, members of this church community, and as part of the greater worldwide church. First, we must see the gaps where God's love and grace is needed. Like those ships, we must see the flares and hear the distress call. Like the proverbial ostrich with his head buried in the sand, we must first look with open eyes and see the need, no matter how gruesome or disturbing. We must also hear with open and non-judgmental ears the stories of the oppressed and marginalized, and with an open heart, seek God's will. We must shout, "What would you have me do, Lord? Your servant is listening." Brothers and sisters, there are many gaps in the world. There are many sinking ships around us. What would you do? If we claim to be followers of Christ, then it is clear that we must put our faith into action. We must respond individually and collectively. But which gap do we fill? Where will you bring God's love? That, my friends, is between you and God. Seek him, and he will guide you to your place in the gap. He will provide you with what you need, but first, you must be willing to fill the gap. May God bless you.